The departures board at gate B12 of John F. Kennedy International had stopped flickering an hour ago, and the news on the news screen was the kind that made grown men sigh and pretend not to look at their wives. The air smelled faintly of cold coffee and the warm dust of overworked vents. The carpet was the soft, worn blue of all airport carpets of midnight, and the chairs were the cold, hard kind, but pressed a small ridge against the back of the knees of anyone who sat too long. Flight 1180 to Los Angeles, oversold. 6 volunteers needed. No volunteers found. 6 passengers chosen. Among the names called over the loudspeaker, in the small, careful voice the gate agent reserved for bad news, was Iris Calloway. She did not move at first. She sat in seat 14 of the row of plastic chairs, a plain navy travel dress on her shoulders, her dark blonde hair caught in a loose braid, and listened to her name as if it belonged to someone else. Then she rose, very slowly, took her single carry-on, and walked to the desk. "Ms. Calloway," the agent said, eyes on a screen. "I'm afraid we couldn't get you on this flight. We can rebook you on tomorrow morning's 7 a.m. That's after my interview. I understand. I can offer you a hotel voucher and a meal credit." The voucher slid across the counter on a printed slip. The hotel listed on it was 40 minutes from the airport by shuttle. The meal credit was $12. Iris looked at both for a long moment, then folded the slip and slid it back. "I won't be using the hotel," she said. "Thank you." The agent looked up for the first time, almost startled by the quiet voice that had said something it had not expected. "Ma'am, the next available. I'll wait at the gate," Iris said. "If anyone cancels, I'd like to be first on the standby list." "You'd have to wait 6.5 hours. I'll wait." She walked back to her chair with the same straight-backed quiet, sat down again in row 14, and folded her hands on her lap. The plastic of the chair was cold under her palms. The soft hum of the overhead vent was warm against the side of her face. She did not cry. She did not call anyone for 10 full minutes. She watched the plane she should have boarded push back from the jet bridge and taxi away into the dusk. And she thought of her mother's voice on the phone that morning, telling her, "You go. You have worked for this for 10 years. You go, and you don't come back without that job." The job was a pediatric nurse position at Cedar Pacific Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, the one she had been studying towards since she was 15 years old in the small Ohio town where she had grown up. The interview was at 9 the next morning. She had $911 in her checking account. The shuttle to a respectable hotel and a cab to the hospital would eat almost half of it, and she would arrive at the interview wearing the same dress she had slept in. The voucher hotel was not worth the cab ride. She would sleep in the chair. She had slept in worse places. She had grown up sleeping in worse places. Across the gate, in the row of chairs that faced hers from the other side of the aisle, a tall man in a charcoal suit closed the laptop he had been pretending to read for the past 10 minutes and looked at her properly for the first time. His name was Nathan Hale Whitford. He was 32 years old. He owned, among other things, the second largest private aviation logistics company in North America and a small brass plate of a startup that had quietly become the 4th largest hospital scheduling platform in the country. He had spent the past hour at gate B12 rerouting 6 emails, drafting a board memo, and doing what he often did at airports, which was watch other people while pretending to do anything else. He had watched the agent call 6 names. He had watched 5 of those passengers shout, threaten, and then accept the hotel voucher with a sour face. He had watched the 6th one sit quietly down in row 14 and refuse the hotel and ask to be put on the standby list. And he had watched her, in the long half-hour since, sit very still and try not to be seen by anyone, including herself. He had not planned to involve himself in another person's bad evening. He never did. He sat in airports the way some men sat in churches, and he kept his head down. But there was something about the straightness of her back and the carefulness of her folded hands that he could not quite leave alone. He looked at the wall behind her, at the screen above her head, and at the gate agent who was already looking past her at the next problem. Then he stood up. He did not approach her first. He approached the desk. 2 first-class tickets to LAX, he said. Tonight, whatever flight you have. The agent blinked at him. Sir, the next direct departure is the 11:20 service from gate B19. We can... That works. There are only 2 first-class seats remaining on that flight, sir. I'll take both. The agent looked at him, then looked at the wall, then began to type. May I have the names of the passengers? He gave his own name first. He paused. He glanced over his shoulder. The young woman in the navy travel dress was still in row 14, her hands still folded, her eyes on the dark window where her plane had gone. He turned back to the agent. The second passenger is the woman who was bumped from your last flight, he said. Calloway. Iris, I think. Sir, I am sorry, I cannot transfer another passenger's reservation onto a... You're not transferring anything. Print her a new ticket on the new flight. I will pay for both. You will tell her the airline found a seat for her on the next flight to Los Angeles, and you will ask her if she would accept it. Sir, I can't tell her. Then I'll tell her, he said gently. But you'll print the boarding pass first, please. The agent looked at him for a long moment, and at his black corporate card, which he had set on the counter with the kind of plain politeness people reserved for not making a scene. And then she began to type again. Iris was studying the carpet pattern in front of her chair and counting the hours until the standby list would update, when a polite voice in front of her said her name. She looked up. The man in the charcoal suit was standing at the row in front of hers. He was not as old as the men her mother always told her to be careful around in airports. He was perhaps 30. He had the kind of face that did not give anything away easily. Slate-grey eyes and very dark hair cut close on the sides. And he was holding 2 boarding passes in his hand. Ms. Calloway, he said. I'm sorry for interrupting. I'd like to ask you something. Yes? There's a flight at 11:20 to Los Angeles, he said. 2 first-class seats. They were both available a moment ago. I bought them both. She looked at him. She looked at the boarding passes. She looked at him again. I'm sorry, I don't... One of them has your name on it, he said. If you want it, it's yours. If you don't want it, I'll go back to the desk and ask them to refund the second seat, and we'll forget I said anything. For a moment, she did not speak. She looked at the boarding pass he was holding out to her, and at the name printed on it in black letters, and at her own faintly trembling reflection in the dark window past his shoulder. Then she looked back up at him. There was no sweetness on her face, no softening. There was something much steadier than that, and harder, and a little hurt. Why? Because they bumped you and you didn't argue, he said. And the woman behind you yelled at the agent for 15 minutes and got a free upgrade for her trouble. I don't like that math. I'd like to fix it. With your own money? Yes. For a stranger? Yes. Why? He looked at her for a moment. He could feel several answers forming, the practiced ones, the gracious ones, the ones that worked on shareholders and reporters. He discarded them all. Because my mother once stood at a gate like this when I was 4 years old, he said quietly. And a stranger paid for our ticket home. The only thing she ever told me she wanted me to do with my money was that. So I do that. I'm sorry if it offends you. Iris stared at him. She had grown up in a house where strangers did not pay for things, and people did not say the word mother in public the way he had just said it. She had grown up learning the difference between charity and dignity, and she had learned that the first was a wound, and the second was a coat. She did not move toward the boarding pass. She did not move away from it. What do you do? She said finally. I run a company that flies things. And another one that schedules hospital shifts. Why? Because if you are a man who is buying me a ticket so that I will say yes to anything else later, I would rather sleep in this chair. He almost laughed. He didn't. He nodded once and met her eyes. It's a ticket, he said. Get on the plane, sit in your seat, eat your meal. When we land, you will not see me again. You can pay me back $5 a month for the rest of your life if it makes you sleep better. The seat number on this pass is 2B. Mine is 2A. You will have to look at me for 5.5 hours. That is the only price." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "Okay." He held out the pass. She took it. Gate B19 was a long walk from B12. They walked side by side without speaking, two strangers carrying their own bags, the airport noise washing around them like water around two stones. Iris kept her boarding pass folded between her fingers, as if it might dissolve. Nathan kept his eyes on the floor a few steps ahead, the way a man walks when he does not want to look like he is escorting anyone. At the new gate, they sat, one chair apart. He opened his laptop. She opened the small paperback she'd been carrying for the past 3 hours and had not read a single page of. After a few minutes, he closed the laptop. "Have you eaten?" he said. "I had pretzels." "On the bumped flight?" "They give them out before they bump you." "That seems counterintuitive." "It softens the blow." The corner of his mouth moved. He stood up. "I'm going to that place." He nodded toward a sandwich kiosk 100 feet down the concourse. "I'm getting one for myself. If you tell me what kind, I'll buy you one. If you don't, I'll guess, and I am told my guesses are unreliable." She considered him. "Turkey," she said. "On something with seeds." "Drink?" "Water." "Tea?" "Water." "That is a deeply unromantic answer." "You're not supposed to be romantic. You said 5.5 hours and we never see each other again." "Fair," he said, and went. She watched him go. She did not understand, yet, what was happening to her, or to the plane that she was now going to be on. She had agreed to it, the way she had agreed to almost every difficult thing in her life, by deciding it could not be worse than the alternative. The alternative tonight was a chair, no interview, and going home to Iris Calloway, with the long, quiet face that meant another year of waiting. So she had said yes. She thought, while he was gone, of the small kitchen in Ohio where her mother had taught her, at the age of 9, the rules of being a careful woman in a careless world. The kitchen had smelled, every morning of her childhood, of strong black tea and warm toast, and the faint, sweet smoke of a wood stove banked low in the next room. The rules were short. You earned what you ate. You looked people in the eye when they tried to give you something for free. You wrote thank you notes by hand. You did not borrow money from anyone whose face you could not look at twice the next morning. The kitchen had a window over the sink that faced east, and Vivian had hung a small white curtain in it, because she had been raised on the idea that windows over sinks should be dressed properly, even if the rest of the house was not. Iris had grown up beside that curtain. She had watched her mother take a second job at 52 and a third at 58, and she had watched her mother fold her hands every morning on the windowsill before the day began. Iris folded her hands now in the airport chair the same way. It was, she realized, the only posture she had ever truly inherited. The concourse around her was almost empty. The fluorescent lights had been dimmed for the late hour, and a janitor had come past with a small hum and a slow yellow machine that polished the floor. Outside the long window, the runway lights blinked in a slow, steady code that she did not know how to read, but that comforted her anyway, because it suggested that there were rules to the night, and that someone in a tower somewhere was watching them be obeyed. Across the gate, by the window, an elderly woman in a beige cardigan was struggling to fit her wheeled suitcase under her seat. Iris stood up, walked over, knelt on one knee, and tilted the suitcase the right way. The woman thanked her in a thick Russian accent and pressed her dry old hand briefly to Iris's cheek, the way grandmothers in small towns did. When she sat back down, Nathan was already returning, 2 paper bags balanced in his hand. He had seen the small interaction. He did not comment on it. He put a sandwich in front of her, a bottle of cold water sweating in its plastic, a small bag of green grapes she had not asked for, and a paper napkin on which she had written, in tidy block capitals, "You are not in my debt." The bread of the sandwich was still warm and smelled of fresh sourdough and salty turkey and a sharp green herb she could not yet name. He sat down, opened his own sandwich, and took a bite. She read the napkin. She put it carefully in her dress pocket. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome." They ate side by side without speaking. After a few minutes, in the low voice of a man giving a question more weight than he wanted to, "What's the interview for?" She glanced at him. "Pediatric nurse, Cedar Pacific." His face did something small. "That's a good hospital." "You know it?" "I know who runs the scheduling for it." She blinked. "That's the company you mentioned?" "Yes." She asked him twice, in 2 short questions, whether he intended to tell anyone at Cedar Pacific to hire her, or to tell them anything about her at all. He said no to both. She asked him to promise. "Ms. Calloway, I have not been called to promise something to a woman about a job in 11 years. Yes, I promise. I will not say a word to anyone at Cedar Pacific about you, before, during, or after your interview. I will not appear at your interview. I will not call anyone after your interview. If you get the job, you will get it because they wanted to give it to you. If you don't, you will not, and that will be their loss." She watched him a long time. "Why are you saying it that way?" "Because I'd want someone to say it that way to me." She nodded, slowly. She returned to her sandwich. Around them, the boarding announcement began to crackle. He looked at her, and there was that same small change in his face again. The smallest possible softening. The kind that came and went so fast that it almost did not happen. "They're calling our zone," he said. "Okay." They stood up. He let her board first. She did not realize, until she was standing at the door of the aircraft, that the man who had bought her ticket was not the kind of man she had been prepared to expect. He was the kind of man who knew the flight attendants by name and was greeted, very softly, by both of them as he stepped onto the plane. He was the kind of man who handed his suit jacket to the lead attendant before being asked, and he waited for Iris to be settled in her aisle seat before he took his own. When she was buckled in, she asked him, half curious, whether he flew this airline often. He said he did. The flight attendants, she observed, knew him. He told her they knew his company more than they knew him personally. His firm moved a lot of people through this carrier in any given month. She watched the lead flight attendant, whose name tag said Camilla, give Nathan a second polite nod, and then a look at Iris that contained no judgment at all, only quiet, professional curiosity. Iris had braced herself for that look to be different. She unclenched her jaw a fraction. The leather of the seat under her hands was warm and smooth, soft as a worn coat, and faintly fragrant with the bright, clean smell of fresh citrus polish. The plane began to taxi. Nathan opened a leather folder. Iris folded her hands and watched the lights of the airport gates slide past her window. "Thank you," she said, quietly enough that he could almost have not heard it. "You're welcome," he answered, just as quietly. He did not look up from his folder. The plane lifted, banked west over the bay, and leveled out into the high dark. The cabin lights dimmed. The few remaining passengers in first class settled into their seats with the small adjustments of people who flew often. A magazine fanned, a blanket shaken out, a phone tucked into a seat pocket. Across the aisle, an older man in a dark blue suit slept already. 2 rows back, a woman in a long ivory coat wrote in a small leather notebook with a slow, deliberate hand. The cabin had the muted hush that wealthy spaces took on at night, the sound of soft fabric and quieter engines, and the small clink of a glass being placed back into its tray. Iris had never sat inside that hush before. She had stood at the edges of it, in coach, all her life, looking past the curtain toward the small, wider seats where people did not have to take their shoes off to feel rested. She found, now that she was inside it, that it was not as remote as she had thought. It was simply quieter, and the quiet had been waiting for her. Iris watched the small white dots of New Jersey roll under her window and thought, for the first time all day, that she had no immediate problem to solve. She was on the right plane. She was sitting in a wide, soft seat. She had a sandwich in her stomach. She had the napkin folded in her pocket. She had 10.5 hours until her interview, which had become a manageable number again. Beside her, Nathan worked. He read documents in a steady, silent rhythm. Once, he made a small note in the margin with a heavy black pen. Once, he closed his eyes for a moment, as if to think. He did not look at her again for 30 minutes, and she found, to her own surprise, that she was grateful for this, and not insulted by it. He had said 5.5 hours. He had not promised her his attention. He was simply not making her feel watched. Around the hour mark, the cabin attendant Camilla came down the aisle with the tray. She bent toward Nathan first. "Mr. Whitford, the usual?" "Just a black coffee tonight, thanks, Camilla." "And Miss Calloway?" Camilla asked, turning to Iris. She had said her name correctly. Iris glanced sideways at Nathan, who was already turned toward his folder again. "Tea," Iris said. "Of course." When Camilla left, Iris said very quietly, "I thought I said water." "You said water at the gate. We are on a different plane now. You are allowed to change your mind. Also, it is freezing in here." "You told her my name." "I told her there was a passenger in 2B and that her name was Ms. Calloway. I gave her the same information that is printed on her manifest. I said nothing else." She looked at him. He looked tired. She had not noticed earlier. The faintest shadows under his eyes, the way his collar was rumpled in the back. She had assumed, when she first saw him, that he was the kind of man who never looked tired. She had been wrong. She returned, after a moment, to what he had said about his hospital scheduling company. She wanted to know whether Cedar Pacific was one of his contracts. He confirmed it was. She asked how much of his business it accounted for. "Less than 1% of revenue. We took the contract 2 years ago when the hospital almost lost its accreditation. It was pro bono for the first year." She looked at him a long moment and asked him, simply, why? He considered the question. He had a way of considering questions, she had noticed, that looked like he was deciding which answer was true rather than which one was clever. "Because I lost my mother to a hospital that scheduled their on-call nurses badly," he said. "It was 3 a.m. and there were 2 nurses on duty for 32 patients. She had a stroke at 3:14. She rang at 3:18. The nurse came at 3:31. I was 27 years old. I had just sold my first company. I sat in the parking lot at 4 in the morning and decided I was going to do scheduling instead of jets." There was a long moment of silence. Camilla returned with 2 cups, set them down, and went away. "I'm sorry," Iris said. "I know. You said that to a stranger." "I said that to a pediatric nurse." She looked at him. There was no smugness in his face. There was something close to embarrassment, in fact. The look of a man who had not meant to say that much, and had said it anyway because the question had been quiet and gentle, and he was tired. "That's not why you bought my ticket," she said. "No." "But it's why you're talking to me now." "Maybe," he said. He took a drink of his coffee. "Or maybe I'm talking to you now because the lights are low, and you have a face that makes a man want to stop pretending to read. Take your pick." She did not answer that. She drank her tea. After a long quiet, she said, "I'm sorry about your mother." "Thank you." "My father left us when I was 11, she said, evenly, the way she had learned to say it years ago. "He didn't come back. I don't tell strangers either." "I'm sorry." "I know." They sat for a while in the dim cabin, while the plane ate the dark across the country. She did not know yet that she was going to spend the next decade of her life beside this man. She only knew that her shoulders had unclenched, and her sandwich was warm in her stomach, and the napkin was folded in her pocket, and the plane was going where she needed it to go. Below them, somewhere in the long darkness over Ohio, the small town she had grown up in was already asleep. The pharmacy had closed at 9. The diner on the corner had closed at 10. The street where she had walked every weekday morning of her childhood, between the small white house and the brick elementary school, was empty, under a single yellow streetlight that the county maintenance crew kept meaning to replace. Vivian Calloway was on the 3rd night shift of her week at the regional hospital, monitoring a unit of 7 patients she had monitored for 11 years. And she was thinking, in the small, quiet way she thought about her daughter, that Iris had landed by now in California, that Iris was probably in a cheap hotel by now, that Iris would be all right, because Iris was always all right, and that Vivian had once promised herself she would not raise a daughter who had to be all right. And yet, here she was, raising one. She would not learn until lunch the next day that her daughter had not, in fact, slept in a cheap hotel, but in a corner suite on the 11th floor of a building she had never seen, paid for by a stranger she had not yet decided whether to keep. In the cabin, Nathan turned a page in his folder. The pen made a small, dry sound against the paper. The seatbelt sign, somewhere, gave a single soft chime and went out. Iris watched the flap of the curtain to first class move very slightly with the air, and she thought of nothing in particular, which was the closest thing to rest she had felt in nearly a year. She did not mean to fall asleep. She had not slept the night before the interview, and the cabin was warm now, and the engine was a steady, distant hum, and Nathan had gone back to his folder. She closed her eyes for a moment around hour 3, and woke up to a flight attendant gently leaning across her seat and saying, "I'm sorry, ma'am. Are you the nurse?" Iris was awake instantly. She had spent 4 years of nursing school and 2 years of overnight shifts at a county clinic, waking up that way. "Yes," she said. "There's a passenger in row 23 who's having trouble breathing. Mr. Whitford said you'd want to know." Iris was on her feet before the sentence was finished. Nathan was already standing in the aisle with his hand on the seatback, his face neutral, his eyes on hers. "Did you tell them I was a nurse?" she said. "I told them there was a nurse in 2B if they needed one. I did not give a name. Camilla asked you, not me. Go." She went. In row 23, the elderly Russian woman from the gate was hunched forward in her seat, gripping the armrest. Her cardigan was unbuttoned. Her face was pale, almost grey. Her skin was cold and slightly damp under Iris's fingers. Her granddaughter, a girl of perhaps 12 in a soft pink sweater, was sitting beside her, eyes wide, hands clenched. The cabin around them was warm and dim and quiet, the small overhead lights making bright, soft circles on the navy carpet of the aisle. "Ma'am, my name is Iris. I'm a nurse. May I check on you?" The old woman nodded. What followed took Iris 7.5 minutes by the cabin clock. She felt for the woman's pulse, thready, fast. She asked Camilla for the medical kit, the oxygen, and the manifest's note on this passenger. She found, on the woman's wrist, a faded silver medical bracelet that read, "Diabetes, insulin dependent." She asked the granddaughter, gently, when the grandmother had last eaten. The girl said the kosher meal had not been right, so she had only eaten the bread. Iris felt a small, quiet click of relief in her chest. This was hypoglycemia, and she could fix it. She asked Camilla for orange juice and for sugar packets, mixed them, put a small straw between the woman's lips, and spoke to her in slow, even words. She held her wrist for the next 10 minutes. She watched the grey drain out of the woman's face by inches. She watched the woman's pulse slow under her fingers. She watched the granddaughter unclench her shoulders. When it was over, she stayed crouched in the aisle for another 2 minutes anyway, because a good nurse did not stand up the second the danger was past. When she finally stood and walked back up the aisle, the cabin behind her was very quiet. People who had been pretending not to watch were pretending harder. Camilla was at the front, eyes shining, mouthing "thank you" with both hands pressed to her chest. The captain's voice came on briefly to say that the situation had been resolved by a passenger of the cabin, and to thank that passenger personally. Iris reached row 2 with her cheeks burning, sat down quickly, and stared at her hands. Nathan did not say anything at all. He did not say, "Well done." He did not say, "You were amazing." He did not even look at her face. He took the small paper napkin from her tray, tipped a little of his water onto it, and placed it gently in her hands. She had not noticed her hands were shaking. They were shaking now. "Drink," he said. "I'm fine." "Drink anyway. Adrenaline." She drank. She closed her eyes. She felt his shoulder, very lightly, beside hers in the dim cabin. Not touching, just there. The plane flew on. After a minute, she said, "Thank you for not making a scene." "You did not need a scene. You needed a glass of water." "That woman might not have made it." "You are correct." "In coach, with no nurse on the plane." "You are not in coach." She opened her eyes. He was looking at the seat in front of him, not at her. He was so careful with her that she could feel it. "Why did you tell them I was a nurse?" she said again, more quietly. "Because Camilla came up the aisle white-faced and said someone was struggling and the doctor on board had not come forward. I had a person beside me who told me her interview was at Cedar Pacific. I made a deduction. I told her. If you had not been a nurse, I would have looked stupid. I am willing to look stupid." She watched him for a long time. She reminded him, gently, that he had said he would not introduce himself to anyone in her life. He answered that Camilla was not in her life. She told him that Camilla might be, that she might fly this airline again. "Then I will not fly it on the same nights." She almost laughed. She did not. She sat back in her seat and watched the dim ceiling of the aircraft above her. And she felt, for the first time in a year, a small, clean feeling that was not loneliness or hunger or fear of tomorrow. It was the feeling of being in the right place, beside the right person, doing the right thing. It was unfamiliar enough that she did not yet know what to call it. They landed at LAX at 3 minutes past 2 in the morning, Pacific time. The cabin emptied slowly, the way late-night cabins do, and Iris stood when most of the passengers had gone. Nathan stood with her. Camilla walked them off the plane personally and pressed a small white card into Iris's hand at the door. "My number," she said. "If you ever need a flight to anywhere, you call me. We owe you. The airline owes you. You will not pay for a seat on this airline again." Iris did not know what to do with the card. She put it in her dress pocket beside the napkin. In the jet bridge, Nathan slowed his step to match hers and asked, in his quiet way, where she was going. She told him, briefly, about the cheap airport hotel she had picked out from a website at $12 a night. He pointed out, just as briefly, that there was no such hotel in walking distance, that a cab at 2 a.m. cost more than the room itself, and that her interview was in 7 hours. She heard him out. She did not stop walking until the jet bridge was empty behind them. And then she stopped, and he stopped, and turned toward her. "Listen to me a moment," he said, not unkindly. "I have a hotel about 12 minutes from this gate that I keep 2 suites in for staff. The corner suite on the 11th floor is empty tonight. There is a separate entrance, a separate elevator, a key that locks from the inside. There is a clean change of clothes in the closet because my assistant keeps spare wardrobe there for emergencies. And you are her size. The breakfast service starts at 6. The hospital is 20 minutes from the front door. If you say no, I will call you a cab to the cheap hotel and pay for it. But I am telling you what is available." She looked at him. She reminded him, in a careful voice, that he had said 5.5 hours, that they were now at 5 3/4, that he had promised. He acknowledged each of these in turn, without offering a defense. "I am offering," he said quietly. "I am not insisting. There is a difference. The cab is in my pocket. The suite is also in my pocket." You choose. She thought about it. She thought about her dress, slept in for 2 flights and a medical emergency. She thought about her face in the morning. She thought about Vivian Calloway, who had told her 10 years ago that you could be poor, and you could be tired, and you could be afraid, but you could not afford to be unprepared. She thought about the napkin in her pocket. You are not in my debt. I'll take the suite, she said. On 3 conditions. He nodded, waiting. She told him the conditions plainly, the way she had told her mother at the age of 17, the conditions under which she would let her mother sign the loan for nursing school. He was not, on any night, to sleep in the same hotel. He was not, in the morning, to drive her to the hospital. He was not, on this day or any future day, to tell anyone at Cedar Pacific that he had helped her. Not after she got the job. Not after she did not. Not in 5 years. Not in 20. He agreed to all 3, in 3 short sentences. And that was enough. He nodded. He pulled his phone from his pocket. He made a single, short call. He spoke in the soft, polite tone of a man who had been giving instructions all his life. Then he put the phone away. There will be a car at curb 7. The driver's name is Ben. He will take you to the hotel. The night manager's name is Hannah. She will check you in under your own name, which I will not give her until you give it to her. The key is at the desk. The card you used to fly is the only card you'll need for room service, which is also free, because no one has used the corner suite this week and the food expires. You're a terrible liar, she said. I'm an excellent liar, he said. I'm just not lying. He held out his hand. She did not take it. He did not seem offended. He nodded once, polite. Good luck tomorrow, Iris Calloway. He walked away. She watched him go. The car at curb 7 was a quiet, dark sedan with no visible markings of any kind. The driver, a man in his 50s named Ben, opened her door without making her look at him longer than she needed to, did not ask her any questions, and drove her, in 12 minutes precisely, to a hotel whose name was not on the signs at the entrance. The night manager at the desk, Hannah, did not ask for her credit card. She handed over a key, a small white card with breakfast hours written on it in tidy block capitals, and a folded note. Inside the corner suite on the 11th floor, the bed had been turned down on one side only. The closet held 3 blouses and 2 pairs of trousers in approximately her size, with the tags still on. The bathroom held an unopened toothbrush, an unopened tube of toothpaste, a small glass jar of moisturizer that smelled faintly of lemon, and a folded grey robe. The desk by the window held a small bottle of mineral water, a green apple in a white bowl, and a single index card on which someone had typed, Room service, 24 hours, menu in drawer. Breakfast, 6 a.m. Good luck tomorrow. There was no signature. There were no flowers. There was nothing in the suite that asked her to feel grateful in any direction in particular. She set her carry-on on the luggage stand. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long minute, with her hands folded the way her mother had taught her, and let the day end inside her ribs. What she had not seen, in the jet bridge an hour earlier, was the man with the camera at the far end of it, the one who had been waiting for Nathan Whitford the way a certain kind of photographer waits at airports. She had not seen the camera lift, twice, and catch the 2 of them at the moment Nathan was holding out his hand to her. She would not learn until the next morning, in a small office at Cedar Pacific, that the photo would be on a financial gossip blog by the time her interview had begun. But the man saw it. He took it. He sent it. By the time Iris stepped out of the corner suite at 7:30 the next morning, in a clean cream blouse and the same navy skirt she had pressed in the bathroom at 6, the photo of her with a man whose name she had only learned a few hours ago had been seen by, among others, the chief medical officer of Cedar Pacific Children's Hospital, who would interview her at 9. The lobby of Cedar Pacific Children's Hospital had been built around a waterfall. It had won an award in an architecture magazine 8 years ago. The water made the whole atrium hush, the way a forest hushes around a stream. The air smelled of cool stone, and the bright green tang of fresh-cut eucalyptus from a tall vase by the entrance. Iris stood on the wide marble floor at 8:45 and counted her own breaths. The marble was cold under her thin shoes. The morning sun came in soft and warm through the south wall of glass and lay in long, bright bands across her feet. The walls of the atrium were a pale platinum stone that the architect had chosen, she had read once, because it reflected the colors that small children wore. There were small children in the atrium now, 2 of them in blue hospital pajamas walking slowly along the railing of the upper balcony, with a young man who was almost certainly their older brother, and one of them in a wheelchair, near the entrance, being read to by a hospital volunteer in a pink cardigan. The volunteer was reading a book about a bear who had lost his hat. The little girl in the wheelchair was laughing softly and patting the cardigan as if to thank it for being soft. Iris watched all of this for the 8 slow seconds it took for her to understand that she was, in fact, in the right place. She had spent 10 years studying a profession on the strength of one decision she had made at the age of 15 in a small Ohio waiting room beside her grandmother. She had never in those 10 years walked into a building like this one, where her decision was clearly already living. Her hands stopped trembling. Her shoulders dropped 1/4 of an inch. She straightened the collar of the cream blouse, which was not quite hers, and which fit her better than any blouse she owned. She took the small folder of references from her bag. She walked toward the front desk. She was met by a tall woman in her 40s named Dr. Amelia Park, the head of the pediatric oncology unit, whose handshake was warm and steady. Doctor. Park led her down a quiet corridor that smelled of clean linen and the faint bright tang of fresh-cut citrus, into a small office with 3 chairs and a low desk of pale honeyed wood. 2 other people were already in the chairs. The first was a woman Iris recognized from her research, Dr. Eleanor Bennett, the chief medical officer, a sharp, narrow person with iron-grey hair and a small gold pin shaped like a horse on her lapel. The second was a man with a tablet on his lap and a careful, neutral face, whom Iris did not know. "Ms. Calloway," said Dr. Bennett, "thank you for coming. Please sit." Iris sat. "Before we begin," Dr. Bennett said, sliding the tablet a fraction of an inch toward her, "I wonder if you would clarify something for us." The tablet showed a photo. The photo was of Iris and Nathan Whitford in a jet bridge. He was holding out his hand. She was looking at him. The headline above the photo, on a small finance blog with a logo that looked like a spider, read, "Private Flight, Private Face. Who is the mystery woman on Nathan Whitford's midnight lax run?" Iris's stomach went to the floor and stayed there. She did not, however, move. She had grown up in a house where you did not show pain to people who were looking for it. "Yes," she said. "Of course." Dr. Bennett asked her, in the careful tone of a person reading a deposition, whether she was in a relationship with Mr. Whitford. Iris said no. The chief medical officer asked whether she had ever been, and Iris said no, and then explained, in a single, steady sentence, that she had met him the previous evening at JFK after being bumped from a flight, and that he had bought her a first-class seat to Los Angeles so that she would not miss this interview. The questions kept coming, each smaller than the one before. He had paid for her travel. Yes. Last night. Yes. She was aware that Mr. Whitford's company held the scheduling contract for this hospital. She was aware now. She had not known this when she accepted the seat. No, she had accepted it anyway. Iris felt the small, cold air of the room enter her lungs. She felt the moment for what it was, which was the moment that decided whether she had thrown her life away on a plane ride. She thought of Vivian Calloway. She thought of the napkin in her pocket. She thought of the elderly Russian woman with her hand on Iris's wrist. She put her hands flat on her knees. "Dr. Bennett," she said calmly, "I will not lie to you to get this job. I accepted the seat because I had no money for a hotel and an interview at 9 in the morning. I asked Mr. Whitford 3 separate times if he intended to mention me to anyone at Cedar Pacific. He told me 3 separate times that he did not. I asked him this morning to put it in writing, which he did by email. I have it on my phone. I will give it to you now if you would like. Doctor. Bennett's eyes flickered. You asked him to put it in writing? Yes. I emailed him from the suite at 5 and asked him to confirm it in writing. He answered before 6. So you anticipated this conversation? I anticipated that taking help from a stranger could be misread. I am a woman who has spent 6 years earning a nursing license while paying my mother's heating bills. I do not take help easily. When I do, I document it. The man with the tablet wrote something down. Dr. Bennett looked at her for a long time. Ms. Calloway, she said, we have your resume. We have your references. We have the photo. We have your answer. Walk us through, please, the events of last night, between the time you arrived at gate B12 of John F. Kennedy and the time you stepped out of the suite this morning at 7:30. Be specific, be brief. Do not embellish. So Iris told her. She told her about being bumped. She told her about the voucher and refusing it. She told her about the man in the charcoal suit. She told her about the boarding pass with her name on it. She told her about the sandwich, the napkin, and the specific wording of his promise. She told her, without theatrics, about the diabetic emergency in row 23. She told her about Camilla, the card, the curb, Ben, Hannah, the suite, the email, the breakfast, and the cab she had paid for herself this morning to come here. When she was done, the room was very quiet. Dr. Bennett looked at Dr. Park. Dr. Park looked at the man with the tablet. The man with the tablet nodded once, slightly. Ms. Calloway, said Dr. Bennett, tell me about hypoglycemia in adults over 70 with no insulin on board. The interview began. The interview ran 2 hours. They asked her 31 clinical questions and 4 ethical ones. She answered each with the steady plainness she had used on Nathan in the jet bridge, which she had not, until this morning, recognized as her professional voice. At the end, Dr. Park walked her down to the lobby, shook her hand, and told her they would call her by the end of the day. Iris walked out of the building, around the corner, into the small park across the street, and sat on a bench and did not move for 40 minutes. She thought, in that hour, of many things. She thought of her mother. She thought of the elderly Russian woman who would be home in Encino now, eating a proper breakfast. She thought of the photograph. She thought of Nathan, who must have seen the photograph too by now, and what kind of meeting he must be in, and what kind of damage the photograph might be doing to him, and what kind of man takes a damaged reputation in exchange for a stranger's flight ticket, and does not call her once to complain. She did not know how she felt about that. She knew she did not feel angry at him. She did not yet know what to do with the absence of anger. At 12:15 her phone rang. It was Dr. Park. Ms. Calloway, the committee is unanimous. We would like to offer you the position. Welcome to Cedar Pacific. She closed her eyes. She did not cry. She thanked Dr. Park, accepted the offer with steady words, asked the start date and the salary and the formal next steps, and ended the call. She sat on the bench for another 5 minutes. Then she opened her phone and scrolled slowly to the email Nathan had sent her at 6 that morning, the one where he had written, in tidy block capitals at the bottom, "As promised, no contact with any party at Cedar Pacific, before or after. Sleep well. N.H.W." She did not write back. She did not yet know what to write back. She put the phone in her pocket and walked instead to a small grocery store at the corner and bought a single yellow tulip in a paper sleeve, because Vivian Calloway had once told her that yellow tulips were for thank you and white were for goodbye, and she had not yet decided which one this was. She did not go to Nathan's office. She did not have his office address, and she did not want it. But the photo had a date, and the date had a place, and the place had a name. And by 2 p.m. her phone was telling her that Mr. Nathan Whitford, of Whitford Aviation Logistics, was at this hour appearing live before a small group of Cedar Pacific Hospital trustees in their downtown boardroom, in answer to questions that had been raised by the photograph, the contract, and a rumor that had begun on a finance blog. She put the tulip in her bag. It was, she would think later, the longest 4 blocks of her life. She walked them slowly, because she did not yet know what she was about to say, and because she had been raised by a woman who believed you should never enter a room you had not first thought your way into. She passed a coffee cart on the corner of the 2nd block and bought a small black coffee that she did not really want. She passed a line of black town cars idling outside a hotel, drivers leaning against doors with their phones in their hands. She passed a woman walking a small white dog in a tartan coat, both of them looking equally bored. She passed a young man in a navy suit, running with a binder under one arm, late for something. The city moved around her the way cities move around small, still people, with the slight indifference that allowed them to be alone in plain sight. She thought of the way Vivian Calloway always said, when Iris was small and had to do something she did not want to do, that courage was not a feeling. Courage was the act of opening a door. She had opened a great many doors that way. This would be one more. She took the elevator to the 14th floor of a building she had read about that morning, said her name to a polite woman at a reception desk, and asked to be admitted. The polite woman blinked. "I'm sorry, Miss Calloway. The trustees' meeting is closed. Tell Mr. Whitford that the woman from the jet bridge is here. Tell him I would like to speak." The woman picked up the phone. 3 minutes later, the door opened. Inside the boardroom, 15 people were sitting around a long teak table. Dr. Bennett was one of them. Nathan Whitford was at the far end, in the same charcoal suit he had been wearing yesterday, except the collar was crisp now, and the rumple was gone. He looked up at her once, and the look that passed across his face was small and warm and unguarded, and it was gone again before the rest of the room could see it. "Miss Calloway," said Dr. Bennett. "I'd like to say something for the record," Iris said, "if you'll allow it." The chair at the head of the table, an older man with kind eyes, gestured to a seat at the side. Iris did not sit. "I was at JFK last night," she said, "and I was bumped from a flight I needed in order to interview here. I did not know who Mr. Whitford was. I did not know his company held a contract with this hospital. He did not know I was interviewing at Cedar Pacific until I told him on his plane. He bought my ticket because, in his words, his mother once stood at a gate like that, and a stranger paid for her ticket home, and his mother told him to do that with his money, and he does that. He paid for my hotel because I was going to sleep in an airport chair, and he disliked the math of that. He has not asked for one thing in return. He has not, until this moment, been in the same room with me again. He will not, after this moment, be in a room with me again unless I ask him to be. The photograph in your packet shows him offering me a handshake at the door of a jet bridge. I did not accept it. He left. That is the entire story." The room was silent. "I have one more thing to say," Iris went on. "I was offered the pediatric nurse position by Dr. Park 43 minutes ago. I have not accepted it yet. I will accept it now, in this room, in front of all of you, because I want you to know that I am taking this job because I have earned it, and not because of anything Mr. Whitford did or did not do. If anyone at this table doubts that, I will gladly walk back to Dr. Park's office and decline." Dr. Bennett, after a moment, said, "Ms. Calloway, do not decline. The job is yours." Iris nodded once. She turned to leave. "Ms. Calloway," said Nathan, very quietly, from the far end of the table. She stopped. "Thank you," he said. She looked at him. "Mr. Whitford," she said, just as quietly. "I'll see you at 5. The lobby." She took the small folded napkin from her pocket, the one he had written, "You are not in my debt," on at the airport, and laid it on the corner of the teak table nearest his hand. Then she left. The walk from the trustees' building back to the waterfall lobby took her 22 minutes on foot, through 3 blocks of office towers and one small open square where a fountain had been turned off for the season. She did not take a cab. She walked because she needed the time to be alone with what she had said in that room, and with what had happened in her chest while she was saying it. She had spoken in front of 15 people whose careers had been longer than her life. She had defended a man whose last name she had only learned the day before. She had taken a job in front of all of them, knowing, as she did so, that she had now signed her name to a small, public version of her own dignity that she would not be able to take back. She passed a bookshop on the way and stopped briefly in front of the window. There was a hardback novel on display and a small handwritten card under it that read, "Staff Pick, a quiet, generous love story." She did not buy it. She did not need a quiet, generous love story. She had walked into one yesterday, by accident, and was, at the moment, on her way back into it on purpose. She was at the lobby at 4:58. The lobby smelled, faintly, of warm cedar and clean cold water from the atrium fountain. He was already there. He had not changed his suit. He was holding in his hand the napkin from the airport, the one she had put in her dress pocket and washed and dried that morning, the one she had returned to him by leaving it folded on the corner of the boardroom table when she had walked out. He was holding it the way a man holds a small object he has been given. He observed, with a small lift of the napkin, that she had returned it. She told him that he had been keeping it. He asked her if she had read it. She said she had. He waited for the rest of the sentence. "You are not in my debt," she said. "I read it twice. Both times this morning. Once when I woke up, once before I went into the interview." He waited for the second part. She let him wait, briefly, before she gave it to him, that she had been glad of the line both times. He looked at the napkin. He folded it into a square. He put it back in his inside pocket, against his shirt, where she could see, for a moment, that he had a small leather wallet there with 3 other things in it, none of which was money. He looked up at her. "I am sorry about the photograph," he said. She told him it was not his fault. He answered, evenly, that it was, in part, that he had forgotten photographers waited at airport gate doors for him, that he should not have walked her off the plane. She told him that he had walked her off the plane, and that she was glad of it. He repeated the words, gently, as a question, even with this morning. She answered him without hesitating. Especially with this morning. He looked at her. There was something on his face she had not seen before, not at the gate, not on the plane, not in the boardroom. It was the look of a man who had been alone for a very long time, and who had just remembered that he had not always been alone, and who was deciding, slowly, that he might not need to be alone for the rest of his life. "Iris," he said, "I am going to say something to you that you do not have to answer today, or tomorrow, or in a year. I am going to say it once, and then I will go home. You will tell me, in your own time, what you would like to do with it. All right? I have done a great many small, kind things for strangers in the last 11 years, he said. It is the only thing I am sure my mother would be proud of. I have done it in airports, in hospitals, in restaurants, on cold streets in winter. It has never once, before today, felt like an introduction." He paused. He did not look away. "Last night, halfway across the country, I sat next to you in a dim cabin, and I watched you save a woman's life with a sandwich and a packet of sugar. And I thought, in a quiet voice in my own head that I did not often hear, that I would like to know you for 30 years. Not a date, not a weekend, not a public occasion. I would like to know who you are when you are tired, and what you read, and what you eat for breakfast, and what you say to your mother on the phone. I would like to be allowed, eventually, to bring you a cup of tea on a cold morning, and not have to write a note on a napkin to explain it." He put his hand briefly to his pocket, as if to confirm the napkin was still there. "That is what I am saying. I do not need an answer. I will not contact you. If you contact me, I will be glad. If you do not, I will not be sorry I said this. Goodbye, Iris. He turned to go. She let him take 3 steps. Then she said, Mr. Whitford. He stopped. There are 2 airport hotel rooms in this city that are mine, by your accounting, she said. One I slept in last night, one I have not yet seen. I would like to see the second one. He turned around. That is not an answer, he said. It is the beginning of an answer, she said. Bring me a cup of tea on a cold morning. We'll start there. We'll see what it turns into. He stood very still. He did not move toward her. He did not move away. After a moment he said, in the voice he had used at the gate, the one that was small and steady and not quite practiced, I would like that very much. She told him, plainly, that this was all right with her. He hesitated, in the way men sometimes hesitate before saying a thing they have not quite earned the right to say. He told her, when he found the words, that Camilla wanted to fly the 2 of them home for Thanksgiving, and that he had not been home in 5 years. Then we will go, she said. He smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile properly. It was the smile of a man who had not used those particular muscles in a long time, and was a little surprised to find them still working. He held out his hand. This time, she took it. A year later, on a Tuesday in the small hours of the morning, Gate B19 of John F. Kennedy International was almost empty. The air was cold and bright with the metallic smell of jet fuel and the warm, soft scent of new bread from a small bakery kiosk that had stayed open late. The boarding agent for the 11:20 service to Los Angeles was the same young woman who had been on duty the night Iris Calloway had been bumped from Flight 1180. The agent did not recognize at first the woman who walked up to her counter in a rich emerald cashmere coat and a soft pearl grey scarf, until the woman handed over a boarding pass with the same name, in the same letters, that had crossed her desk for a different flight 13 months ago. Ms. Calloway, she said. Welcome back. Thank you. You are 2B again. I am. Mr. Whitford is in 2A? He is. The agent smiled, polite and soft, and stamped the pass. In the row of chairs at the gate, in seat 14, Iris sat down beside Nathan Whitford. She was wearing a small gold pin, shaped like a paper napkin on her lapel, which his sister had had made for her last Christmas, and which she had not taken off since. The cashmere of her coat was soft against her wrist. The leather of her bag was warm where she had been holding it. He was wearing the same charcoal suit and a faintly rumpled collar. His laptop was closed on his knees. He had not opened it once at the gate this evening. He had not done that in 11 months. Tea, he said. Water. At a gate. At a gate. That is a deeply unromantic answer. I learned it from a stranger. He looked at her for a moment. He took her hand. He did not say anything about the napkin in his inside pocket, the original one, which had been laminated by Camilla as a Christmas gift, and which now lived above the small leather wallet on the inside of his jacket. He did not say anything about the 2 corner suites in this city, neither of which they used anymore because they had bought a small house in a side street near her hospital. He did not say anything about the ring in his pocket, because the ring was for next week, on a Saturday, at her mother's house in Ohio, with a yellow tulip on the table and Vivian Calloway watching from the doorway. He had asked Vivian's permission 3 months ago, and she had said yes, and then cried for 15 minutes into a tea towel, and they had agreed not to say anything to Iris until the day of. The boarding announcement crackled. They're calling our zone, Iris said. Okay. They stood. They walked toward the door of the aircraft. 2 ordinary people carrying their own bags, the airport noise washing around them like water around 2 stones. At the door of the plane, Camilla was waiting for them. She greeted Nathan first and Iris second, and pressed Iris's hand briefly the way she had done on the night of the diabetic emergency. They walked down the aisle, and Nathan let her board first. because he had learned that he likes to watch her go ahead of him into rooms and aircraft and futures. In the row of chairs they had just left, the boarding agent was already calling the next zone. She watched Iris and Nathan disappear into the jet bridge, the way she watched 1,000 passengers disappear every week. Then her eyes flicked, by old habit, to row 14, where the chair was still warm. She thought, for a brief moment, of the night a year ago when she had told a quiet young woman in a navy travel dress that she was sorry the flight was oversold, and could she be put on the 7 a.m. tomorrow. She had not, until this moment, thought of that night again. She thought of it now. She wondered, briefly, how many small bumped people, on how many small bumped nights, had walked away and not been brought back into first class by a stranger. She felt something move, very small, in the back of her throat, the way a small bell moves when no one is around to hear it. Then she turned and called the next zone. Above her, Flight 1180 began to push back from the jet bridge. In seat 2B, Iris Calloway settled into her wide, soft seat. Beside her, in 2A, Nathan Whitford folded his hands in his lap and closed his eyes. The cabin lights dimmed. The plane began to taxi. She turned to look at him, the way she had done 100 times now, and saw that his mouth was moving in the smallest possible smile. The kind that came and went so fast, it almost did not happen. "What?" she said. "You're still in 2B. You're still buying out first class." "I will buy it out every time, for the rest of my life," he said, "to sit beside you." She rested her head very lightly against his shoulder. The plane lifted, banked west over the bay, and leveled out into the high dark.